Clara Bennett was not someone people noticed. Every evening she entered the grand doors of Apex Industries, pushing her cart filled with cleaning supplies. She wore a faded blue uniform that had seen better days, and her hands were rough from years of hard work. Clara didn't mind being invisible most of the time. It gave her space to think about her kids, Emma and Liam, or plan how to stretch her paycheck just a little further this month. But tonight things felt different. The offices at Apex Industries buzzed with energy even after hours. The building was always alive, its glass walls gleaming under fluorescent lights. Tonight, however, it wasn't the usual quiet hum of computers or soft footsteps echoing down the hallways. Instead, there was laughter, loud, obnoxious laughter coming from the break room on the 5th floor. Clara hesitated for a moment before continuing toward the source of the noise. She needed to collect the empty coffee cups scattered around the area anyway. As she approached, Clara could hear voices clearly now. They belonged to Richard Hayes, Laura Dixon, and Daniel Brooks, the top executives at Apex Industries. These three were often seen strutting through the halls like royalty, barking orders at junior staff and making snide comments whenever something didn't meet their standards. Clara had learned early on to avoid them if possible. But tonight, avoiding them wasn't an option. She pushed open the door gently, careful not to make any noise. Inside, the trio stood near the coffee machine, sipping steaming mugs and chatting animatedly. None of them paid attention to Clara as she bent down to pick up discarded cups from the table. That was fine by her. She preferred staying out of sight. What she didn't expect, though, was what came next. "Did you see that woman who cleans our floors?" Richard asked suddenly, his tone dripping with mockery. He leaned back against the counter, balancing his mug casually in one hand. "What's her name again?" "Clara. Yeah, Clara." Laura rolled her eyes dramatically. "Honestly, Richard, why bother remembering names like that? She's just part of the help. No one cares." Daniel smirked, chiming in eagerly. "Right? I mean, can you imagine doing her job? Scrubbing toilets and mopping floors all day? If I were her, I'd have quit ages ago." Richard laughed loudly, slapping Daniel on the shoulder. "Exactly. Who would want to be stuck in a dead-end job like that? Honestly, I don't get it. Why doesn't she just find something better?" Their words hit Clara like a punch to the gut. She froze mid-motion, her fingers gripping the edge of the trash bag tightly. Her face burned with shame, but she forced herself to keep moving. Picking up another cup, she tried to focus on the task at hand instead of the cruel jokes flying over her head. Still, each sentence stung more than the last. "You know," Laura said thoughtfully, tapping her chin with a perfectly manicured nail. "Maybe she likes being invisible. It's easier than dealing with real responsibility, right? Or maybe she just doesn't care," Daniel added with a shrug. "Some people are content with mediocrity. Not everyone wants to climb the ladder like us." Clara bit her lip hard enough to draw blood. She wanted to scream at them, to tell them exactly how wrong they were. Did they really think she enjoyed scrubbing grime off their pristine floors? Did they believe she chose this life because she loved it? Of course not. She worked these long hours because she had no other choice, because rent needed to be paid, groceries bought, and braces saved up for. Because life hadn't handed her the same privileges it had given them. But Clara stayed silent. She finished gathering the cups and straightened up slowly, taking a deep breath to steady herself. As she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass wall behind them. The woman staring back at her looked exhausted, defeated, but also angry. Very angry. And in that moment, Clara made a decision. She wouldn't let their words define her. She wouldn't let them win. Back in the hallway, Clara pushed her cart toward the elevator, her mind racing. She replayed their conversation over and over, each insult cutting deeper than the last. For years, she had told herself that their opinions didn't matter, that she was above their petty judgments. But tonight, something inside her snapped. Maybe it was the way they laughed so carelessly, as if her struggles meant nothing. Or maybe it was the realization that they truly believed she was worthless. Whatever it was, Clara knew she couldn't go back to pretending everything was okay. When the elevator doors opened, Clara stepped inside and pressed the button for the ground floor. As the car descended, she stared at her reflection in the shiny metal doors. Her jaw tightened and her eyes narrowed with determination. This wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Someday, somehow, she would prove them wrong. Now Clara returned to her duties, finishing her rounds with a renewed sense of purpose. Each swipe of the mop felt less like drudgery and more like preparation for battle. By the time she clocked out for the night, she had already started planning her next move. Little did those executives know, their mocking remarks had ignited a fire within her, a fire that wouldn't burn out anytime soon. The next morning, Clara woke up earlier than usual. Her alarm buzzed at 5 o'clock sharp, but she hadn't slept much anyway. After tossing and turning all night, replaying the events from the previous evening over and over again, she finally decided it was time to get moving. Today wasn't going to be like any other day, she could feel it in her bones. Clara's small apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Her kids, Emma and Liam, were still asleep in their room. She tiptoed around the kitchen, making coffee and packing lunches for them before leaving a note on the counter. "Be brave today. Love, Mom." It was short, but it carried so much meaning. For why? Them and for herself. As she stepped outside, the crisp morning air hit her face, waking her up fully. For once, Clara didn't head straight to work in her cleaning uniform. Instead, she wore the only semi-formal outfit she owned, a navy blue skirt and blouse borrowed from her neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. Though it wasn't perfect, it made her look presentable enough for whatever lay ahead. In her hand, she clutched a plain black tote bag, pretending it was a briefcase. When Clara arrived at Apex Industries, the scene before her was nothing like the calm, predictable mornings she was used to. There was a commotion at the front entrance. Employees stood clustered together, talking animatedly, while security guards blocked access to the building. A few people tried to push past, only to be turned away firmly. "What's going on?" Clara asked a young man standing nearby, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. He shrugged, looking just as confused as everyone else. "No idea. Something about a change in leadership or something crazy like that. They're not letting anyone in without clearance." Clara frowned. Change in leadership? That sounded serious. But why would such a thing happen overnight? She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should leave and come back later. Then almost instinctively she approached the security desk. "Excuse me," she said politely to one of the guards. "I'm Clara Bennett. I clean here. Do you know what's happening?" The guard glanced at her briefly, then did a double take. His expression shifted from indifference to surprise. "You're Clara Bennett?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Yes," Clara replied, feeling uneasy. "Why?" Without another word, the guard disappeared behind the desk and returned moments later with an envelope. He handed it to her cautiously, as though it might explode. "This is for you," he said simply. "For me?" Clara echoed, her heart skipping a beat. She took the envelope and stared at it, her name printed neatly across the front in bold letters. With trembling hands, she opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. As she read the contents, her eyes widened in shock. The letter informed her that due to unforeseen circumstances, she had been appointed as the new CEO of Apex Industries. Effective immediately, all executive powers rested in her hands. It went on to explain that legal representatives were waiting upstairs to assist with the transition, and urged her to report to the executive suite as soon as possible. Clara blinked several times, certain she must be dreaming. This had to be some kind of prank or maybe a mistake. How could someone like her, a cleaning lady, suddenly become the CEO of a massive corporation? Yet the letter looked official, complete with signatures and company seals. And the guard's reaction confirmed that this wasn't a joke. Her mind raced with questions. Why her? What had happened to the previous executives? Was this real? Despite her doubts, Clara realized she couldn't ignore the opportunity staring her in the face. Whether it was fate, luck, or sheer madness, she decided to seize the moment. If nothing else, she owed it to herself, and to those who had mocked her to find out what was really going on. Taking a deep breath, Clara squared her shoulders and walked toward the elevators. Security guards parted to let her through, their expressions ranging from confusion to awe. Employees whispered among themselves, pointing at her as she passed. Some looked skeptical, others amused, but most seemed genuinely baffled by the sight of a woman in a borrowed outfit striding confidently into the heart of the company. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, Clara stepped into the executive suite for the first time. The space was luxurious with plush carpets, polished wood furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the city skyline. Waiting for her were three well-dressed individuals, a lawyer, an accountant, and a human resources manager, all holding folders filled with documents. "Ms. Bennett," the lawyer greeted her warmly, extending his hand. "We've been expecting you." Clara shook his hand, trying to mask her nervousness. "What's going on?" she asked bluntly. "How did this happen?" The lawyer exchanged glances with the others before answering. "To be honest, we're not entirely sure ourselves. There are clauses in the company charter that allow for unusual transitions of power under specific conditions. Suffice it to say, you now hold full authority over Apex Industries." "But why me?" Clara pressed. "I'm just a cleaner." The accountant cleared his throat awkwardly. "Your name appeared as the sole beneficiary in these documents. We can't explain it, but legally speaking, there's no disputing your position." Clara sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the weight of the situation. Everything felt surreal, like stepping into a movie where roles were reversed overnight. Still, she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't back down now. Not after everything she'd endured. Over the next hour, the team explained the basics of running a corporation, walking her through financial reports, organizational charts, and pending projects. Clara listened intently, absorbing every detail, despite her lack of experience. She may have started as a cleaner, but she was determined to rise to the challenge. Finally, the lawyer handed her a schedule for the day. "Your first task is to call a meeting with the senior staff," he said. "They'll need to hear directly from you about the changes." Clara nodded, her resolve hardening. She imagined the faces of Richard Hayes, Laura Dixon, and Daniel Brooks when they learned the truth. Would they recognize her? Would they laugh it off as some absurd misunderstanding? Either way, she was ready to take charge, ready to prove them wrong, and ready to show the world that even someone like her could rewrite the rules. With newfound confidence, Clara stood up and smoothed her skirt. "Let's do this," she said firmly, heading toward the conference room where her journey as CEO would begin. Little did she know the hardest part was yet to come. Clara stood outside the conference room door, her heart pounding like a drum. She could hear muffled voices inside, sharp tones slicing through the air as the senior staff argued about the sudden change in leadership. Richard Hayes, Laura Dixon, and Daniel Brooks were clearly unimpressed by the chaos unfolding around them. They had no idea what, or rather who, was waiting for them on the other side of the door. Taking a deep breath, Clara pushed the door open and stepped inside. All conversation stopped instantly as every eye turned to her. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then recognition dawned on their faces, followed quickly by disbelief. "Is this some kind of joke?" Richard blurted out, his face reddening with anger. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms tightly across his chest. "What is she doing here?" Laura Dixon narrowed her eyes, studying Clara from head to toe. "Who do you think you are, walking in here like you own the place?" she sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're just the janitor." Daniel Brooks let out a sarcastic laugh, shaking his head. "This has to be a prank. There's no way someone like her could actually be running this company." Clara ignored their hostility, keeping her composure intact. She walked calmly to the head of the table where an empty chair waited for her. Pulling it out, she sat down and placed her hands flat on the smooth surface of the table. Her gaze swept across the room, meeting each pair of eyes before settling on Richard. "Good morning," Clara began, her voice steady and clear. "My name is Clara Bennett, and effective immediately, I am your new CEO." The room erupted into murmurs and protests. Some of the junior executives exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to react. But Richard, Laura, and Daniel remained defiant, their expressions hardening further. "This is ridiculous," Richard exclaimed, slamming his fist onto the table. "There's no way the board would appoint someone like you. You don't even know the first thing about running a company." Laura chimed in, her tone sharp and cutting. "Exactly. We've spent years building Apex Industries into what it is today, and now you expect us to take orders from you? This is insane." Clara listened patiently, letting them vent their frustrations. When they finally fell silent, she leaned forward slightly, her posture relaxed but commanding. "Let me make one thing very clear," she said, her voice firm. "I didn't choose this position. It was given to me. Whether you like it or not, I am now in charge. If anyone has a problem with that, feel free to submit your resignation right now." Her words hit like a thunderclap. The room went quiet again, everyone frozen in stunned silence. Even Richard, Laura, and Daniel seemed momentarily speechless, their arrogance faltering under the weight of her authority. Seizing the opportunity, Clara continued. "Now let's talk about why we're here. Apex Industries has been successful, yes, but at what cost? I've seen firsthand how employees at every level are treated. Long hours, low pay, and zero respect for those who keep this company running. That ends today." She paused, letting her words sink in. Around the table, people shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Clara noticed a few nods of agreement from the younger staff members, who had likely experienced similar struggles themselves. "I'm introducing sweeping reforms," Clara announced. "Starting immediately, bonuses previously reserved for top executives will be redistributed to fundraisers for lower-level workers. Transparency will become a priority, and communication between departments will improve. Everyone deserves to feel valued, not just the people sitting in this room." Richard scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Oh, please. Do you really think throwing money at people will solve anything? You're going to ruin the company with these naive ideas." Clara raised an eyebrow, unfazed by his condescension. "Actually, studies show that happier employees lead to better performance and higher profits. Funny how that works, isn't it?" She pulled out a folder containing data and reports she'd reviewed earlier with the legal team. Sliding it across the table, she gestured for them to look it over. "Here's proof. If you'd rather cling to outdated practices instead of adapting, that's fine. But I won't tolerate anyone standing in the way of progress." Laura snatched the folder and flipped through it impatiently, her lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel leaned over to glance at the contents, his brow furrowing as he read. Even Richard reluctantly scanned the documents, though his scowl deepened with each page. When they finished, Clara spoke again. "These changes aren't up for debate. They're happening whether you approve or not. My goal is simple: to create a workplace where everyone feels respected and empowered. If that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe this isn't the right place for you anymore." Her final statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. For the first time, Richard, Laura, and Daniel looked uncertain. They glanced at each other, silently weighing their options. None of them dared to argue further, not yet, anyway. As the meeting drew to a close, Clara dismissed the group, instructing them to prepare reports on their respective departments for review later in the week. One by one, they filed out of the room, still reeling from the unexpected turn of events. Only Richard lingered behind, his jaw clenched tightly. "You won't last long," he muttered darkly as he passed Clara on his way out. "Enjoy your little power trip while it lasts." Clara watched him go without responding. She knew there would be challenges ahead. People like Richard wouldn't give up their positions of privilege without a fight. But she also knew she had something they lacked: resilience. She'd faced worse than their insults and mockery, and she wasn't about to let them intimidate her now. Once the room was empty, Clara allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a start. She had taken the first step toward proving that true leadership isn't about titles or wealth. It's about integrity, empathy, and the courage to stand up for what's right. With renewed determination, Clara gathered her notes and headed back to her office. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. Whatever obstacles came her way, she would face them head-on, with strength, grace, and unwavering resolve. Over the next few days, Clara wasted no time putting her plans into action. She started early each morning, reviewing reports, meeting with department heads, and learning everything she could about the inner workings of Apex Industries. Though she didn't have years of experience in corporate leadership, she had something far more valuable: common sense, empathy, and a deep understanding of what it meant to work hard without recognition. These qualities guided her decisions, earning her the respect of many employees who had long felt ignored or undervalued. But not everyone was pleased with the changes. Richard Hayes, Laura Dixon, and Daniel Brooks grew increasingly desperate as Clara's reforms began to take shape. Bonuses that once lined their pockets were now being redirected to fundraisers for lower-level workers. Transparent communication channels were established, giving employees a voice they'd never had before. Even the cleaning staff, once treated as invisible, received fair wages and opportunities for advancement. Frustrated and humiliated, the trio decided to fight back. They spread rumors, accusing Clara of incompetence and claiming she had somehow manipulated her way into the CEO position. They whispered behind closed doors, trying to rally support among other senior staff members. But their efforts fell flat. Most employees saw through their lies, especially after witnessing the positive impact of Clara's leadership firsthand. Still, Richard, Laura, and Daniel refused to give up. Their frustration boiled over during a second executive meeting, where tensions reached a breaking point. Clara entered the conference room carrying a thick folder filled with evidence she'd gathered over the past week. She took her seat at the head of the table, watching calmly as the others filed in. Richard, Laura, and Daniel exchanged smug glances, clearly believing they held the upper hand this time. "Before we begin," Richard said loudly, leaning forward in his chair, "I think it's important to address some concerns. There have been whispers among the staff about your qualifications, Clara. People are questioning whether you're truly fit for this role." Laura nodded vigorously, adding, "It's only natural, given the circumstances. No offense, but running a company like Apex requires experience and expertise, not just good intentions." Daniel smirked, chiming in eagerly. "And let's not forget the financial implications of your so-called reforms. Redistributing bonuses? Really? That's going to hurt the company in the long run." Clara listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When they finished, she opened the folder and slid several documents across the table. "Interesting points," she said evenly. "But I think these will answer your questions and raise a few new ones." The trio glanced at the papers suspiciously, then began reading. As they flipped through the pages, their faces turned pale. The documents contained emails, financial records, and testimonies exposing years of misconduct. Richard had embezzled funds to cover personal expenses. Laura had bullied junior staff members, driving several talented employees to quit. Daniel had falsified reports to inflate his team's performance metrics, jeopardizing key projects. This is outrageous," Richard stammered, slamming the folder shut. "Where did you get this?" "It doesn't matter where it came from," Clara replied coolly. "What matters is that it's all true. Every word." Laura stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You can't prove any of this. These are baseless accusations." "Oh, I can prove it," Clara countered, pulling out additional files. "And if necessary, I'll present them to the board or the media. Either way, the truth will come out." Daniel sank back into his seat, his confidence crumbling. "You wouldn't dare," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Would," Clara said firmly, "but I'm giving you a choice. You can resign quietly, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly how you've been running this company." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of Clara's words hung heavy in the air, crushing the arrogance that had defined Richard, Laura, and Daniel for so long. Finally, Richard broke the silence. "You won't get away with this," he growled, his face red with anger. "Mark my words, Clara, this isn't over." "Actually, it is," Clara replied, standing up. "Security will escort you out of the building. Collect your belongings and leave immediately. You will not receive severance packages or references from this company." With that, she pressed a button on the intercom, summoning 2 security guards who waited outside the door. They entered the room, their expressions stern and professional. Without another word, Richard, Laura, and Daniel were led away, their protests fading as they disappeared down the hallway. Once they were gone, Clara turned to the remaining executives, her tone softening slightly. I know this has been difficult for everyone. Change always is. But I promise you, these reforms are for the better. Together, we can build a company that values integrity and teamwork above all else. The room erupted into applause, surprising, even Clara herself. Many of the junior staff members looked relieved, while others smiled warmly at her. For the first time in years, people felt hopeful about the future of Apex Industries. Later that afternoon, Clara walked through the halls of the office, taking in the atmosphere. Employees greeted her with genuine smiles, thanking her for standing up to the former executives. In the break room, she found the cleaning crew chatting and laughing, their spirits lifted by the news of improved wages and benefits. One of the cleaners, an older man named Joe, approached her hesitantly. Ms. Bennett, he began. We just wanted to say thank you. You didn't have to do all this for us, but you did anyway. We won't forget it. Clara smiled, feeling a lump form in her throat. None of us should ever feel invisible here, she said softly. That's why I'm doing this for all of you. As the day drew to a close, Clara returned to her office, exhausted but fulfilled. Looking out the window at the city skyline, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the moments of doubt. But most of all, she thought about the power of resilience and the importance of standing up for what's right. Richard, Laura, and Daniel were gone, but their absence wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Under Clara's leadership, Apex Industries would become a place where everyone mattered, regardless of their title or position. And though challenges still lay ahead, Clara knew she had the strength to face them. With a final glance at the bustling city below, Clara turned off the lights and headed home. Tomorrow would bring fresh opportunities, new battles to fight, and countless lives to inspire. But for now, she allowed herself to rest, knowing she had already made a difference in ways she never imagined possible. Months passed, and under Clara's leadership, Apex Industries transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The changes she implemented didn't just improve profits, they changed lives. Employees at every level felt valued and respected for the first time. Morale soared as people realized their contributions mattered, whether they were answering phones, managing projects, or cleaning offices. Even the once toxic culture began to fade, replaced by teamwork and mutual support. Clara made it a point to stay connected with everyone, from the newest intern to the most seasoned manager. She held regular town hall meetings where employees could voice concerns, share ideas, or simply thank her for the positive changes. During these sessions, Clara listened intently, taking notes and promising action when needed. Her humility and genuine care inspired loyalty among the staff, earning her nicknames like the People's CEO and Clara the Courageous. One of her proudest achievements was the launch of the Apex Empowerment Program. Designed to help lower-level workers advance their careers, the program offered free training, mentorship, and tuition reimbursement for further education. Dozens of employees signed up immediately, eager to seize the opportunity. Joe, the older cleaner who had thanked Clara months earlier, became one of the program's first success stories. After completing courses in facility management, he earned a promotion to head custodian, doubling his salary and gaining newfound confidence. As word of Apex Industries' transformation spread, the company gained recognition beyond its walls. Business magazines featured Clara on their covers, praising her unconventional rise to power and innovative approach to leadership. Journalists called her a trailblazer, a role model for anyone who had ever been underestimated or dismissed. Clara accepted the accolades gracefully but always redirected the credit to her team. This isn't about me, she often said during interviews. It's about proving that kindness and fairness can coexist with success. Despite her growing fame, Clara remained grounded. She continued living in her small apartment, driving her old car and prioritizing her children above all else. Emma and Liam, now teenagers, watched proudly as their mother shattered stereotypes and inspired countless others. At school, they heard classmates talk about how amazing their mom was, and though it embarrassed them sometimes, they couldn't help but feel proud too. Clara's journey wasn't without challenges, of course. There were days when critics questioned her decisions, or former allies of Richard, Laura, and Daniel tried to undermine her authority. But Clara faced each obstacle with calm determination, refusing to let negativity derail her mission. She surrounded herself with trusted advisors who believed in her vision, and together, they navigated every storm. Years later, Clara decided it was time to step down as CEO. Though she loved leading Apex Industries, she knew the company was strong enough to thrive without her constant oversight. At her final board meeting, she announced her retirement, explaining that she wanted to focus on mentoring young leaders and spending more time with her family. The news came as a shock to many, but no one doubted that Clara had earned her peace. Her farewell speech took place in the same auditorium where she'd first introduced her reforms. Hundreds of employees gathered to celebrate her legacy, filling the room with cheers and applause. As Clara stepped onto the stage, she paused for a moment, overwhelmed by the sea of smiling faces before her. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "When I started this journey, I never imagined it would lead me here. I was just a cleaning lady trying to make ends meet, hoping to provide a better life for my kids. But along the way, I learned something important. True strength doesn't come from titles or wealth. It comes from believing in yourself and standing up for what's right." She went on to thank the employees for their hard work and dedication, acknowledging that none of the company's success would have been possible without their efforts. "You taught me that greatness isn't achieved alone," she said. "It's built together brick by brick, heart by heart." Toward the end of her speech, Clara shared a personal story. "There was a night years ago when I overheard some executives mocking me. They laughed at my job, my appearance, my very existence. For a moment, I let their words hurt me. But then I realized something. Their opinions didn't define me. Only I could do that. And so, I chose to rise above their cruelty, not out of spite, but because I knew I deserved better." The crowd erupted into applause, many wiping away tears. When the noise finally subsided, Clara smiled warmly. "To anyone listening who feels invisible, unimportant, or stuck, I want you to know this: your voice matters, your dreams matter, you matter. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." With those final words, Clara stepped off the stage, hugging colleagues and friends as she made her way to the exit. Outside, a limousine waited to take her home, but Clara opted to walk instead. She strolled through the city streets, savoring the crisp evening air and reflecting on everything she'd accomplished. Though she was no longer the CEO of Apex Industries, her impact would endure for generations. The company thrived under new leadership, guided by the principles Clara had instilled. Employees continued to treat each other with kindness and respect, knowing that their workplace was a reflection of her values. And across the country, people drew inspiration from her story, using it as fuel to pursue their own dreams. Clara eventually returned to her roots, volunteering at local shelters and mentoring women seeking careers in business. She also wrote a book about her experiences titled From Mop Bucket to Boardroom. It became a bestseller, touching hearts and changing minds worldwide. In the end, Clara Bennett proved that greatness isn't defined by where you start. It's determined by how far you're willing to go. By staying true to herself and fighting for justice, she turned adversity into triumph, leaving behind a legacy of resilience, compassion, and hope. And though her name faded from headlines over time, her story lived on. A reminder that even the smallest acts of courage can spark monumental change.